nights is the Nelson University Center. And I've been talking with the Minister of Advanced Education and Technology and Training about the possibility, and I think we will, we're in a position now where I believe we will be in the next few days bringing forth a bill which will provide for the registration and accreditation of private post-secondary institutions. So I've been working with him on that, and I'm sure that I'm hope that will come forward in this session. So
probably there's a lot of interest.
Yeah, just a couple of projects. The other areas too. Actually, Creston has got a problem with their seniors and accommodation of seniors with health problems. So I've been working with the Minister of Health on that, trying to find a solution to that. And also, Caslow has a growing extended care facility need. And so I've been discussing that with him as well. So I guess the whole constituency is of concern, and certainly there are little projects here and there. Was over the Bluffs about a week ago, and they're progressing quite well. But I want to ensure that that continues on and is completed by this fall. So.
Well, that touches a lot of bases.
Right.
Hopefully that will give you viewers out there some food for thought and time to form your questions. Of course, you're most welcome to ask questions on any topic you'd like that you think would be appropriate. The number to call to ask your question is 354-4200, and you may call in at any time. So we hope to hear from you. In the meantime, I think we'll start with some questions from our panel. Sean, would you like to start us off this evening?
Sure. Mr. Dirks, you've been recently criticized in the legislature by Mo Sahota. He's accused you of letting down the riding and not living up to your campaign promises. I'd like to know, how do you respond to that, and why should the people of Nelson-Creston vote for you again?
Well, that's an interesting question. Actually, what the newspaper was doing was they published a press release, or supposedly press release, from the NDP that contained that some of the conversation or some of the debate that took place in the House on Friday, a week ago last Friday. What they failed to do was report the first half of that debate. And in that first half of the debate, it was a private member's statement. On Friday mornings, we have private member statements. And Mo Sahota was talking about lotteries and the problem of GoBC and need for guidelines and so on a committee to review these guidelines. And that was what he occupied his first volley about. The unfortunate thing is, and in my reply to Mo Sahota, I pointed out that here we were in May, and we had already put all those recommendations that the Auditor General had brought forward in his report, the Controller General had brought forth in his report for tightening of the guidelines and a committee to review ones that were outside the guidelines. We put that in effect back in February. And here he was in May still talking about the need to do it. And I made some remark that this reminded me of his own constituency, where 700 people were working, volunteers were working on a project, 52 different organizations were working on it, and Mo didn't know anything about it. And as an MLA, I would be ashamed to say I was an MLA if 700 people in my community had been working very diligently on a project, and I didn't know anything about it. And he made that statement in front of CBC television one night. So that rang his bell. It got him very upset. And so instead of concentrating on talking about lotteries, he simply turned around and did a personal attack on me.
Well, we are getting calls off the wall here already.
Very
so
good.
let's go right to our phone-in situation. Take the first phone-in call. Hello, you're on the air. Would you like to ask your question?
Could you have Mr. Dirks explain what he's talking about on the Columbia River?
What he's talking about in the Columbia River, would you like to be more specific in your question?
Well, maybe Mr. Dirks can explain what's happening.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's I guess one of the key things that is going through the constituency, one of the misconceptions there is in the constituency, and I think maybe indeed and throughout the province, is that the Columbia River Treaty is going to be renegotiated. and this is a misconception. It will not be up for renegotiation. The only thing that we will be talking about, the treaty had a 30-year span. And each of the dams, when that 30-year span on the Columbia, each of the dams on the Columbia River, when that 30-year period, that initial 30-year period is over, the downstream benefits that the United States received from the placement of that dam, those will accrue to the province. In other words, we will receive either in electricity or in cash for the electricity what benefit the dams here have created for electrical generation south of the border. And it will be, that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about the Columbia River Treaty. How will we get, first of all, I guess, how will we get those downstream benefits when they do accrue to the province? And they've been varied at, I think one of the figures that I saw was in the billions of dollars that it would accrue to the province. Now, will that come across as power and then be redistributed here or for use up here? Or will it indeed be in cash in place of the power? And what I want to do is assure that some of the downstream benefits, some of that wealth that will flow through to the province, will be spent in this area on wildlife habitat, conservation projects, and so on. And I'd like to establish a management scheme in this area consisting of local municipalities, local representatives, as well as people from the Fish and Wildlife, from Forestry, from all the various ministries that will be impacted by it. Okay. And then have them decide how those funds could best be used in this area for wildlife habitat and conservation purposes.
Okay.
Mr. Dirks, you mentioned, you coined a phrase, billions of dollars could possibly accrue from the benefits of the Columbia River Treaty. The major resource for that, one of the major resources, is of course your riding here. Can you be more specific in how much of a dollar value you would like to see come back to this area? Because there's a tremendous amount of money you're talking about here. Give us a little more concrete idea of what kind of money you want to see back in this riding.
Well, it's still in a very, it's still in a stage where I'm working on it. I really haven't got a final figure as to what those benefits will be, nor do I know. Really, when you start talking about trying to set up a management area, it would really affect not only...
Are you talking about management for wildlife or
for wildlife, and for fish habitat and so on. And you're talking about not only the Nelson-Creston constituency, but you'd virtually go from the Alberta border right through into the Okanagan, because if you went all the tributaries of the Columbia and so on, and all the impacted areas of it. So it's a large area that you would have to look at. And
but getting back to the original question, are we talking about millions of dollars, tens of millions, hundreds of millions for this area here? I mean...
Well, as I say, I'm simply starting to work on that whole scheme. So it's premature to say what kind of dollars I'm looking for.
Okay.
But I want to go down south of the border, look at the system they've got down there. They've got a scheme in place, and see how we can make that work up here.
We've got more phone calls coming in, so let's go to our viewers now. Hi, you're on the air. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I'd like to ask, what is the situation in this town? Why we cannot get, jobs here, and when is one pops up, we cannot get it? Are we unable to get fill up such a places or spaces, or are we still punished for NDP riding situation, or what is it? Why is the reason? What I'm talking about is about a month ago. There was read in a paper about driver's instructor, and they spent money on advertising, and people applied for it, and when all collected, then decided it's all too good for Nelson-ite, so they brought in somebody from Vancouver.
Okay, so the employment problem here, difficulty with getting jobs, and local people being frustrated when they see people from outside our area coming in to get the few jobs that are available.
Yes, in my observation is about last 25 years, it's going steadily.
Okay, let's give Mr. Dirks a chance to address this. Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, I think you're quite right that we have had a job decline in this specific area, especially up till about 1987. But the economy has turned around even in the Kootenays since '87. As far as the motor vehicle inspector is concerned, that would be a government position, and that would have to be posted. And it would be bid on across the province. It would be posted across the province, and it would be bid on across the province. So,
may I catch you there? It was specially just for Nelsonite, because I personally phoned the person who is responsible for it to put ad in a paper, and he said there's no point to anybody else to apply for it because it's going to be Nelson and only for Nelsonites. So I'm really surprised they scratched all the Nelsonites and they brought in from Vancouver.
well, yeah, I don't know who you were talking to about that, because
This happened recently.
if it's a government, if it's a province of British Columbia government position, then it is posted across the province, and people can bid across the province for it.
Okay. Thank you for your call, viewer.
You're welcome.
Suzy, would you like to ask something?
Yes, recently library referendum failed for the
Right.
second time. Now, does Nelson have to go to a referendum for a third time to qualify for Go BC funding?
It has been a policy across the board that we will not put Go BC, especially after the Controller General's report. According to the Controller General, what we should be doing is making sure before we put any money, any provincial money into it at all, there should be assurance that it will go, that the project will proceed, that there is funding indeed in place, if not in place, that there is a good plan for it coming about. So on that basis, we should not go ahead of a referendum. And I think basically, personally, I have said right from the beginning, when Celgar approached me about their aquatic center, they also were looking for Go BC funding before the referendum, and I simply said no. I think that's an unfair way of doing it. You go to the people, you show your total exposure, but once you have done that, if a referendum passes, it would be extremely difficult to turn down a Go BC grant.
I was curious about that myself, because apparently in both of these referendums it was passed by the Nelson area, defeated in the other parts of the region.
Yes.
If there seems to be, as was, if I understood correctly, I believe there was 73% within Nelson voted for that specific project. Does it have to go more than that or outside to be considered a yes vote to the province?
I guess if you well, obviously the library cannot go ahead under that referendum because basically that referendum said we will tax each of those areas or the defined areas. They will contribute by taxation. And the public said no, we don't want to be taxed. It has to pass, but it has to have a majority in each of those electoral areas.
But in Nelson it did, and they did say we would be taxed.
Okay, but it also has to pass in those other areas.
No, but I mean now, let's just say it hasn't passed there. Nelson wants to go it alone. Why are they going to be put through another referendum?
Well, if Nelson wants to go it alone, as long as they can pay for that within a 5 years, so it's short-term borrowing, as long as they can pay for it in a 5-year span, they don't have to go to a referendum. If they have to go to long-term borrowing, it's the same whether they're building a utility yard or whatever they're going to do. Whenever the city incurs long-term debt, it has to take that to referendum.
And then how much of a grants would they qualify for under the Go BC?
1/3 of the funding of it.
1/3.
1/3 of the capital cost of it.
Thank you. I think we have another call online. Let me just check and see. Hello, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Could Howard elaborate on his fertilization plans on Kootenay Lake? He made mention of it. And also, what good would any fertilization plans do with the current fluctuation of lake levels from the Kootenay River dams and whatnot? The lake has been very low, and I don't think that really does the fishing any good, especially the spawning grounds. And also, what about the idea of perhaps setting up a spawning channel on Grove and Narrows, like on Kokanee Creek and Redfish?
Okay.
Okay, one of the historically, one of the problems, I talked to a professor at UBC that was here in 1948 doing a study on Kootenai Lake. And at that time, the lack of nutrients in the lake is why the fishery was as bad as it was. After that, you had the fertilization plant, or the fertilizer plant in Kimberley, that put a lot of effluent into St. Mary's River, and that raised the nutrients in the lake. It found its way into the lake system and raised the nutrients, and you had a period, during the 50s and the 60s when fishing was extremely good in Kootenai Lake because of the high nutrient level. With the cleanup of that fertilizer plant, and with the Libby Dam going into place, the nutrients were trapped behind the Libby Dam. And again, we're back to where we were in 1948. Over the last couple of years, there has been an experiment on the west arm of the lake, fertilizing just the west arm and looking at what happens to the fish stocks there. And the Ministry of Environment, the Fish and Wildlife branch now are confident that you could successfully carry out a fertilization of the lake. It would have to be an ongoing program, and the program would cost somewhere between $250,000 to $300,000 a year. But it would indeed increase the nutrients in the lake and increase the bottom forms, the algae and so on in the lake, that are the food for the bottom forms of that fish food scale. Okay. So precisely where they would do it, how they would do it, that's something that Fish and Wildlife are working on now, but I'd like to ensure that if they do want to go ahead with it, that the funding is in place to do that.
Now, how about the spawning channel up Groman Creek? Would that be feasible?
I really don't know. I haven't, I think they've been hesitant about any further spawning channels because of the fact that what's the purpose in creating more fish if the fish that you do have cannot survive or because of a lack of food. So those bottom elements in the food chain are what they want to improve so that you could indeed improve the size of the fish and the survival rate of the fish. And then I would imagine if that's successful, further spawning channels might well be looked at.
But isn't it true that part of the problem is because the spawning grounds on Groman Creek have been screwed up with the fluctuating lake levels and whatnot? And remember too that a lot of weeds choked up that gravel, and that was part of the reason that the stocks declined.
Yeah, with the dams in place, you certainly don't have that flushing action that you used to have. There are downsides and there are upsides of being able to control lake levels, but and one of the downsides is that you don't have that flushing action that rejuvenates your spawning channels. But I'm not sure whether Fish and Wildlife, I really don't know whether Fish and Wildlife are looking at Groman Narrows.
Okay, thank you very much, caller. Okay, let's go on. David, would you like to ask a question?
Well, there's a couple of follow-up questions that dealing with the fertilization program. You mentioned that you have been working on it, but you want to see the funding in place. I was speaking with Environment Ministry officials the other day. They say they want to do this immediately. How long is it going to take, your process, before you can, do what they want to do?
Yeah, I think you have to, in all fairness, you have to realize that Fish and Wildlife are simply at the stage this year of saying this is what we want to do. Mm-hmm. Up till now, they've been wondering whether it really would pay off, whether they should put their efforts into fertilization, whether they should put their efforts into net pen rearing, which they also carried out an experiment on, whether they should indeed maybe look at the spawning channels that they have up on the north end of the lake. So they're simply in a place now where they're saying, yes, we can go ahead with fertilization. And that has only happened in the last few months. So, and certainly in this budget, this is the budget that I would like to see the money being allocated for that program.
What are you doing at the provincial level to make sure that that money is in that budget?
Talk to the minister. Talk to the minister involved.
What has he said?
Directly. What
has he said?
Well, that's basically, that's an ongoing thing.
Okay.
That's an ongoing thing.
Okay. Following up one question that Sean mentioned earlier that you didn't answer, and that is, why should people vote for you in this coming election, whenever it would be?
Well, I think we were interrupted by the telephone. But I think if you're a newcomer to this area, David, so you can't possibly know what this area was like before
Granted.
86.
Granted. But I
And
think the question
the
is
lack
still
of
valid.
action that was here prior to 1986. If you look at what happened in 1986, the promises that I made in 1986, I've been able to fulfill those promises. I promised to increase access to this area. We will have the Grey Creek Kimberley connector will be open next month. Promised access. We will have that Grey Creek or the Slocan Bluffs. That will be completed this fall. That was a long, outstanding problem in this area. Caslow Airstrip was paved last year, increasing air traffic into there. Nakusp Airport, we're working on that one. We're doing a study right now on the Jumbo Pass. I promised that we would look at some taxation from BC Hydro for its dams. We now do have, it's not taxation, and it's not satisfactory to the Regional District of Central Kootenay, but we do have grants in lieu of taxation on these dams that they didn't have before. I said I would increase the City of Nelson water license, something that they've been fighting for since 1952. The City of Nelson now has an increase in its water license. So, which accrues to the city. It gives the city a profit of somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000 a year that they didn't have before. I've worked with the city as well on their municipal police force. We've had our own police force for years, and we've had to pay the total ticket on it, where other communities like ours were assisted because they had the RCMP. This city now last year got $319,000 for a municipal police force that they never got before. So I have delivered over and over again. There isn't one promise that I made in the last election that I haven't kept. I've taken care of a lot of the backlog of things that weren't attended to in the 14 years prior to my coming to office.
But has
So-
Creston been neglected? I mean, does Creston get neglected because of what you do for
Oh, you want to talk about Creston? No, Creston has had a sewage treatment plant that was a problem for them for years. Creston couldn't expand. They couldn't invite any industry to come because their sewage treatment plant was in excess. They couldn't handle the effluent that they were receiving. We now have the funding in place. Creston couldn't afford the cost of putting a new sewage treatment plant in place. They were still paying for the old one. We now have the funding in place so that they can go ahead and now with this happening, they will be able to invite industry there and expand their industrial base. There isn't one town or community in this constituency that hasn't had direct benefit from me being their MLA.
All right, we're in the midst of a live phone-in show with our guest, MLA Howard Dirks. It's your opportunity to get your answers directly from the horse's mouth, pardon the expression. The number to call here in Nelson is 354-4200. We're ready to hear your calls anytime. And we'll continue. Pat, I think you're next, waiting patiently over here. How about a question for Mr. Dirks?
Okay, Howard, I understand that both L.V. Rogers High School and Hume School have approached you to intercede with the Ministry of Education.
Yes.
So that they can upgrade their facilities.
Yes.
Because I understand that L.V. Rogers has a very bad problem with skunks, and in fact that they've moved into their band room. Which I could understand would make difficult for band practice. Any progress?
Okay, the problem there is that the school board grades their priorities. They set their priorities and they rank each of their major projects by priority. The local school board put that as a high priority. Both LVR, the complete revamp of LVR, they need a new ventilation system. They've got a lot of work to do on LVR. And also the gym at Hume School. It's much too small. In fact, if they want to have a total student assembly, they have to do it in 2 shifts. They can no longer have their Christmas concert in there because they couldn't get their whole student body into the gym because of fire restrictions. So it is a problem. But both of these were ranked as high priority by the local school board and I agree they are high priority, but the ministry, looking at square footages and so on, has them both at a medium priority. And so I've been working with the minister, trying to convince the ministry and his staff that these are a high priority indeed and should be looked after. And my argument, and I think I've got a very strong argument, is that we have, in our regionalization process and so on, we've said the people in the area know best what is for the area. And so I'm using that little hammer on them to say that the people in my area say it's a high priority, and so therefore it should be a high priority. I believe we will be successful. I got a very encouraging letter from the minister the other day, and he said he would see what he could do to make it happen, so I'm going to hold him to it.
You're going to keep at him then?
I certainly will, yes.
Okay, well, we're back to the beginning. Sean, ready for a second round?
I am. You mentioned the lawsuit, or the Regional District of Central Kootenay. I'd like to know how you feel about the lawsuit they've launched against BC Hydro and the Attorney General for back taxes on their municipal taxes over the past 20 years.
Well, I guess it's anybody's right to take legal action. Certainly in our society, that's a right that should be protected, and I wouldn't deny them of that right. Whether they will be successful or not, I'm not sure. I'm sorry that they feel it is necessary to go to the courts about it. I know the other municipalities that are now receiving funding from the BC Hydro under the same scheme as the regional district have taken their checks, have cashed them, and have used that money very effectively in their municipalities or...
But that money is only a fraction of what would be paid for real property taxes.
Yes and no. I guess, yes, it would be if you went to real property taxes the same as you would charge West Kootenay Light and Power. But it is a Crown corporation, and by legislation, it was exempt from taxation.
That's the whole point, is that legislation, is that it's a violation of the Charter of Rights according to the regional districts. No.
Well, yeah, and I guess that's what the courts will have to decide, whether that really is or whether it isn't.
Okay, thank you. Moving right along, Suzy, round two.
You mentioned the Grey Creek Kimberley connector, and I'd like to mention the Balfour Ferry moving. Is there a connection, and why don't you think those people in Queens Bay have been consulted about this very likely move?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that, because basically what we've had, because of the economy picking up in this area, we have had increased traffic. I mean, it doesn't matter what time of the day or night you now come into town. And I live out in Slocan Park now, so I use the highways a little more than I used to use them. But no matter when you come, the traffic has increased. And there is increased traffic on the ferries right now. There is increased pressure for additional service of some sort, or improving the service. So I went to the Ministry of Highways and said we had to do something, we had to look at it. Let's look at our alternatives. And so they are looking, the Ministry of Highways are looking at the alternatives. Should they lengthen the vessels? Can they somehow speed the vessels up? Could they possibly change the routes, and by doing that, increase the service? So they're looking at all the options. And really all they're doing at this point in time is looking at those options. Unfortunately, there are some people that have jumped from a study looking at these options to a point where they're already talking about expropriation of land and so on. And so they're making a quantum leap from a study to say my property is going to be expropriated. Expropriation is, under this administration, expropriation is used very rarely. It's a last resort, and consequently the use of the term even is inflammatory and really shouldn't be used. We're not at a point yet where we could say where those possible routes would be, and indeed if we would put those routes in, whether we might simply in the meantime go to lengthening the ferries that exist right now.
But I have it from a pretty good source that all three of those options you mentioned will be put into effect. Lengthening the ferry, moving it.
Well, if your information is better than the Ministry of Highways, I don't know who would have it. because the Ministry of Highways has complete jurisdiction over the inland ferries.
They have been doing tests of
Yeah.
different speeds of the route back and forth across the lake
They
and
have
checking out various areas.
In order to do a comprehensive study to know what you're doing, you have to do that. You have to look at the various sites, you have to look at various runs and take runs at it. So that you know when you do come forth with a proposal that it's indeed feasible to do it, possible to do it, and what kind of cost you're looking at doing it. But this is nothing new. Back in 1982, when I was on the Chamber of Commerce, we asked for a shorter ferry route. We didn't specify where that route should be, but we felt that if traffic increased, that a shorter route would be of benefit. But at that time, the Ministry of Highways had just spent quite a considerable amount of money on the docks on both sides, and they said it'd be a long time before they'd look at it again.
Well,
But because of increased
the
traffic.
question that comes to mind to me is whether the people who are living in Queens
That's right.
Bay, who seem to be the ones who are concerned that this
Yeah.
may fall right
Yeah.
in their laps, whether at what point they're going to have a chance to have input into this
Yeah.
process and whether that's going to happen.
It will happen. They will have an opportunity for input when there is sufficient information available so that we're all not sitting around talking about rumors and we've got something concrete to discuss. Until you've got something concrete that you can look at and look at the alternatives, there's really no point in sitting around. I mean, you're simply talking about rumors and suppositions.
But they will have a chance to have input before it's a fait accompli in their
Most
laps.
definitely. Most
Okay.
definitely.
We have a caller coming in. Hello.
Hello.
Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I would like to state my question to Mr. Dirks. And I think I heard of the Meech Lake Accord lately. I think he did.
Yes?
Mr. Dirks, what is your stand on the Meech? Your party stands on Meech Lake Accord? And will your party rescind the Meech Lake Accord without the Senate reform? These are my questions.
Okay, I guess the Meech Lake Accord, assent was given to the Meech Lake Accord by the BC legislature, what was it, a year ago or 2 years ago now. That was we were one of the first provinces, I think, that put it through the House. And it was put through by both parties. It wasn't, there wasn't a great debate on Meech in the House at that time. A lot of things have happened since then, and I guess one of our fears right now is really what will happen to Canada if some type of accord. Now, I'm not saying that it has to be Meech. Meech has got some problems. I recognize that. I think most people do. But it was one of the few times in our history where at one point in time, all 10 provincial premiers and the Prime Minister of Canada agreed on some type of formula to work out the problems that face this country. Now, there's been a tremendous backlash, unfortunately, after, I believe it was Bill 178 in Quebec, and Meech has taken the whole aspect of a language situation, a language question. Somehow we have to find an impasse to this whole problem because I think first and foremost, I know when I was foreign, I really appreciated being a Canadian. I'm very proud of being a Canadian. I would certainly hate to see Canada break up, and that is a definite possibility unless we do find some meeting ground where we can all sit around the table and work out our problems and find the reforms that are necessary. So I would sooner try and look for some kind of a accommodation to get everybody back around the table.
Okay, thank you, viewer. Where did we stop? I guess over here. All right, David, another question, please.
Mr. Dirks, one of the subjects that came up recently locally is the concern over removal of the local ambulance service. Do you support that, or what is your feeling on that? I know that there's been a province-wide amalgamation of many ambulance services, but what about Nelson, and what about the jobs that are being talked about here? Unfortunately,
that's not the way it really is. I don't mean to correct you, but we're not taking away an ambulance service. Nelson would have an ambulance service.
What I think the concern is the jobs and the possible loss of
Okay.
jobs here.
Well, and I would say that's not the concern either. The concern, if I read the paper the other day correctly, is the fact that you would have a firefighting force that at your fire hall that would be lesser than you have today. This city cannot afford to have all the firemen on duty that it has now if the ambulance service is removed.
My understanding of what we would get would be one volunteer ambulance man sitting, ambulance person, sitting in the fire hall, and on days like Grey Cup or Christmas, these ambulance people would be encouraged to stay in the fire hall, but they wouldn't be paid unless they went out.
No,
So we're going to get a reduced service to residents of Nelson, and it's going to be more like the system they have in Salmo or in places like Revelstoke, where they are a volunteer basis.
No, I think that's quite inaccurate, Patrick. What you would have is a dedicated ambulance service. You would have a staff on the ambulance service. You would have EMA 2s on the ambulance service. And there would be, I believe, the last time I looked at it, there would be 3 dedicated ambulance EMA 2s with that service. And then there would be additional staff on a call-in basis. But you would have a dedicated staff of 3. Now,
whereas now they do double duty. They go both fire as well as ambulance, and you're saying that there would just be one?
But what the problem is today, and here you get into a jurisdictional dispute, unfortunately, as well. The firefighters are under one union. EHS is under another union. And consequently, you have a situation where I've been working over the last 3 years trying to get the firefighters locally trained to be ambulance attendants, to take the EMA 2 training. The unfortunate thing is what you're doing virtually is you're mixing these two union personnel together. So what will happen, and we were unsuccessful at getting the training. It looked like we were going to get the training earlier on this last year. But we have had a backlash from the Emergency Health Services, the union that covers them. The people that we're training are going to train the ambulance attendants. There was a threat of a boycott if firefighters were brought in for the training and so on. So there's more to it than simply in Nelson. But what would happen virtually in Nelson is the ambulance service would be removed from the fire hall. And the big thing in the paper the other day by Steve Thornton, if you read that accurately, what it says is the city would no longer have the firefighters. It doesn't talk about the ambulance service that will be given to the city, because that would be a dedicated service.
But there would be a loss of 5 firefighters.
But that's right, because the city could not afford.
Looking at lost jobs, and so that if there is.
But only just to the extent that there are 3 of those firefighters that could apply possibly to take the training and become EHS employees. They would have to want to make that switch though. So whether they would or not, I don't know.
So this sounds like a pretty complex
it's more complex, but what it'd end up with is, the unfortunate thing is that you would not be able to have a full firefighting force like you do today. And if you read Simon Gripma's statement at the end of the article, he states very clearly that there'll be some fires and so on. He doesn't talk about the ambulance service. He talks about the need to fight fires.
Okay, we have another call waiting on the line here, so let's go to that. Hello, viewer. Would you like to ask your question, please?
Yes, Mr. Dirks?
Yes.
I'd like to ask you a question on our library issue here. I was wondering if the BC lotteries have been approached to help us out.
Yes, there was an application sent in by the Regional District of Central Kootenai for 1/3 of the capital required for the construction of the library if it was a regional district function. But with that referendum, I just explained it, with that referendum failing, and if the city now wanted to take it over and go on its own, the city would then have to apply for lottery funding for it. But if in the past where municipalities, Sparwood built a library, and once the village or the district of Sparwood was committed to it, we were very happy to make them a grant of 1/3 of their capital costs out of GoBC.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Sean, I think we're back to you for round 3.
Okay. CP Rail has once again applied to abandon a section of rail line near Celgar. I'm wondering
Yes.
how you feel about that, and can the provincial government do anything to stop that? And do you think it's going to become a trend?
Well, the unfortunate thing, and this goes back in history, once the Kettle Valley line was taken out, then we virtually were on a dead-end line. And that line has simply been cut more and more, and now we've got a threat again from the cut from Midway through to Celgar. They had that same application in 2 years ago. And at that time, we went with, through the regionalization process, we worked with the Ministry of Highways, and Bill Strukoff from Grand Forks, who was the chairman of the task force on railways, and myself, he took it into the hearing, and we opposed the abandonment of that line at that time. And I think we were certainly a very major part of the decision-making process to keep it in place until now. We will be launching another application with them, with the commission for hearings and so on, and we certainly will be lodging a protest against the abandonment of that line.
So there is still a possibility of stopping that abandonment?
There is a possibility, but unfortunately over these last 2 years, the arguments that we used 2 years ago for the continuation of the line was the fact that Bradford Intercon, the insulation plant there in Grand Forks, were just expanding their line. We used the argument that Canpar was also simply starting up in their new mill and relied on rail traffic for the export or the shipment of their fiberboard. And we said that there was this increased activity, there was increased demand for the railway. But in the meantime, what has happened is through a lack of servicing or whatever, that increased traffic has not materialized.
What about is that particular line, would that be affected by the proposed expansion of the Celgar Corporation?
Well,
and limit the options for transportation from Celgar if that rail line is abandoned?
It could be if they went to rail cars for chips from Pope and Talbot. There's that sawmill there that certainly the chips from that could be sent up to Celgar by rail. The unfortunate thing is they don't use chip cars now. Pope and Talbot has been shipping chips to Celgar, and they haven't used rail cars for it. They've gone to truck transportation because of flexibility and economics and whatnot. But certainly that's one of the possibilities. Yeah.
I think we have another call. Let's give it a try here. Hello, caller. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Howard on doing an excellent job in the Kootenays. I hope
Thank you.
Hope he gets reelected in the next term.
Thank you.
Also, I'd like to ask, in Manitoba, I was watching on the news, they had the government's planning on decentralizing the major cities of Winnipeg and moving some of the government sectors into the interior, into the smaller cities of Manitoba. And I was wondering if BC would ever consider doing this, because I thought that was a great idea. And also with the technology we have of fax machines and telecommunications, it's quite possible of working out of all government agents, moving out of Vancouver and Victoria and maybe coming up to the interior of BC.
Yes, that was, when we first talked about regionalization, That's the interpretation of regionalization that was carried down in Victoria and Vancouver and caused us unknown trouble with the media down there, especially in Victoria, where they thought everybody in government was going to be moved out of Victoria overnight into the hinterland, and Victoria would suffer drastically. Vancouver felt that it would no longer be the hub, and we would also be moving services out of there. So this is one of the reasons why we got bad publicity for the regionalization process. And it certainly, we have looked at moving some ministry functions out into the regions. We're certainly seriously looking at some of the Crown corporations. We successfully have BC Lottery Corporation in Kamloops, and it's functioning very well in Kamloops. Whether we can move BCR to Prince George, an area that it covers and serves very well. These are possibilities, and I'm sure they're going to be pursued in the next mandate fairly strongly.
Oh, also, what's going on with the your Ministry of State of the Kootenays for a while there? Is that?
I was, yes.
Was that with regionalization?
Yes. That was under regionalization. We're still, what we've done is modified it since November. We abolished the Minister of State function and instead put in a regional board. And that regional board consists of the Minister of Regional and Economic Development, the Honorable Stan Hagen, also Dave Parker for the North, myself for the Kootenays, the two MLAs from the Okanagan, and two MLAs from the Lower Mainland, and the Honorable Jack Weisgerber from Dawson Creek. And we meet as a board and still carry out that Minister of State function at the board level. And we still have, like in the Kootenay region, and this is one area that I'm extremely proud of our accomplishments. The Kootenay region really, under the Honorable Rita Johnson, when she was our Minister of State, and then I inherited it from her, we actually advanced much further than any other region. Our task forces put in place, our advisory committees. We actually were the prototype when you look at the freedom to move that was carried out across the province. Before the Ministry of Highways decided to go in that direction, they came to us and asked us how our regional task force on highways was going, how we set it up, how we brought the people together, and what we were doing, and then fashioned it for across the province on what we had done the previous year in the Kootenay region. We were first on that. We're first on the tourism development planning that is going on right now. We've also got a health plan scheme, health systems plan in place. I'm working on that in the second phase now. So the Kootenay region was really a leader as far as getting grassroots involvement and grassroots input.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. Okay, remember we're on a live phone-in show here. The number to call is 354-4200. Our guest tonight is the Honorable Howard Dirks, your local MLA. Suzy, I think you're next.
Every day we see black smoke billowing out of the Kootenay Lakes Hospital, probably falling on all those kids that are about to play in Gyro Park for the summer. It's very difficult to find out what's going on there, what's being burnt, how we're going to get at it, probably because it's a society. How do we get at this problem? It is a miserable problem.
You know, unfortunately, what has received the most attention from the public as far as pollution has been the pulp mills. And really, if you look at it very carefully, what creates the largest amount of pollution besides the automobile are municipalities, our hospitals, and so on. We really have to come to grips with waste disposal.
And how are we going to do that?
Well, the unfortunate thing is we all suffer from this NIMBY syndrome, not in my backyard. And we have been looking seriously for a place to dispose of wastes, toxic wastes and other wastes. More dioxins actually are going into the air today out of incineration from hospitals than from pulp mills.
Isn't that part of that the reason that they don't feel they have the funds to burn at full capacity?
No, it's really we don't have the capacity in each of the hospitals or to put in a good enough system. You have to have a special system. You have to have special waste disposal, and that really nobody wants it on their backyard. They say, well, we need one in the province. Now, what we're creating under this Sustainable Development Fund that was set up this year, in the budget this year, what we're setting up is a corporation, a crown corporation that will take on the task of finding and putting in place a toxic waste disposal system.
And do you see
One
that as
for the
burning?
province.
Burning, burying? What do you think it's going to be?
Well, it'll be a combination, really. I think that high-intensity burners, it'll be a system of trying to neutralize some of the chemicals so that they are no longer toxic. So it'll be a comprehensive waste disposal system. But it's going to be a hard job to try and find a place that will allow this to happen.
I'm going to break in here just because we're getting really short on time. I think we have time for another question. We've got somebody on the line, so let's give them a chance here. Hi, you're on the air.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Dirks. My name is John Erb, and I'm calling from the Slocan Valley. This is in reference to the Transportation Task Force report for Kootenay Region 4.
Yes, John.
And in the section on rail transportation, Task Force number 1 recommendation was to oppose rail abandonment in principle, and they came to this recommendation on page 34 of their report because railway operators phase out their operations in order to justify their abandonment. The task force recommends that if railways are abandoned, trackage and ties should be left for the use of other operators. Would you support their recommendation? This
Yes.
is reference to the Slocan Valley branch line.
Yes, I would, if you can possibly find another operator to take that over, that'd be great. There was a suggestion out of Revelstoke. A private operator wanted to come in and look at the Castlegar to Midway line if that was abandoned. They also were trying to get Burlington Northern to take over a spur into Midway. But wherever possible that you can maintain that rail service, that's really the way to go.
Would it be possible for BC Rail to operate it?
Well, if there was some way of tying it into their system, if you have to depend, unfortunately, if you have to depend on the running rights, if BC Rail were to say to take over the Slocan and maybe this area here, and then had to depend on CP for running rights on their trackage from here out, they would make the cost of that so exorbitant that you'd never be able to carry it out. So if you could tie it in somehow so that you could truly service it, then yes, but you couldn't possibly run something like BC Rail in a number of isolated lead spots.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
We've got another couple of questioners waiting, so let's go again to our phones. Whoop, not there. Let me try one more time. Nope, that was it. I'm sorry, thought we had a couple of people waiting. So we'll go on. Your turn. David, would you like to ask the next question?
Mr. Dirks, I have a series of questions, and if you could answer shortly because we don't have very much time left. Dealing with something that is coming up this week, the upcoming caucus meeting of the party. Attendance is mandatory to this, if I understand correctly. There's also a lot of talk as to exactly why this meeting has been called. Why has it been called? Tell us.
Well, caucus meetings are simply a gathering of the clan. It's a gathering of all the MLAs that belong to the party. And we, every once in a while, have mandatory meetings to make sure that everybody is there and everybody is heard from and so on.
There's a lot of election speculation around this one.
Oh,
I mean,
that
are we
okay.
going to get it? Are we going to get it this time, or what do we expect?
Well, definitely there will be an election. When, I'm not sure. I would hope that it would be sometime this fall, but I'm sure that that isn't the, well, I shouldn't say I'm sure. Mandatory meeting, this really doesn't put any boogeyman in my mind as far as an election or something like that. It's but a lot of these, a lot of these caucus meetings, we discuss upcoming legislation that might be a little controversial.
Okay, we have another phone call coming in. I'm told it's really there this time, so let's give it a shot. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hello.
Back to the ambulance question.
Sure.
I live on the North Shore, and I'm wondering if I call for an ambulance, does the call go to Nelson, or does it go to Kamloops or someplace to be dispatched?
Since about a year and a half ago, the call has gone to Kamloops for dispatching.
So how do they know, like, just where I live?
Well, what they do is they can trace, the Kamloops dispatch system is quite sophisticated. They will know the number that you're calling from, and they will know the area that you're calling from. And consequently, it's really not as important that they know precisely where you live, because they would then turn around and dispatch the ambulance from the fire hall here, and it is the actual ambulance driver that knows where that precise address is.
So the dispatch goes out from Kamloops, but the ambulance would come from Nelson.
That's right. And it's the driver from Nelson that would know that that address is out on the North Shore and it's up Johnson Road or wherever it is.
Does that answer your question?
Right. But if they're doing away with the ambulance drivers in Nelson, then what's going to happen?
Well, no, dear. They won't be doing away with the ambulance drivers in Nelson. There will be dedicated ambulance drivers in Nelson. It will simply be that they won't be the firefighters.
I see. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Pat, your turn.
All right. Howard, we were talking about the ferries earlier.
Yes.
And with the Robson ferry being moved earlier this year.
It's in service now at Arrow Park. Doing a great job.
It is, yeah. I saw it being refurbished in Shelter Bay recently. I understand that that the actual production and an announcement, an actual sod being turned up in Robson is very close. Am I right in saying that? That the plans are actually underway and they finished their assessment?
Yeah, they have finished their assessment of sites, possible sites. And what they're doing now is they are doing the engineering drawings and showing engineering data that they need to draw up a suitable bridge for that site, looking at approaches and so on for it. But that will not happen unless the Celgar expansion goes into place. But as soon as we know for sure that Celgar expansion is going into place, they'll then be in a position to start construction of the bridge.
But part of the reason that the Cape Horn Bluffs was done was because of the Celgar expansion.
No, Patrick, that's completely wrong. I didn't know about Celgar expansion until they proposed it to me last fall sometime. We've been fighting for the Cape Horn Bluffs for years. It's been a constant political promise that every politician that has ever stood on a platform has promised over the last 16 years.
You mean that?
So it had nothing to do, no. If the Celgar expansion went ahead or didn't go ahead, it had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with Slocan Bluffs. The Slocan Bluffs, if you went through there, that one-lane road was totally unsatisfactory. So it had nothing to do, we were committed, and in fact, chip truck traffic will increase through there if that expansion goes ahead, definitely.
And it will increase down the Slocan Valley as well. And there are a lot of people who are concerned about that because with the railway pulling out and pulling out further up the Slocan Valley up to Nakusp, that was part of the area that if the rail had kept in there and if the provincial government had encouraged the railway to stay in there, then maybe we would see the
the Slocan, but we're getting an omelet here, unfortunately.
You have a very short time to respond to this because we are almost out of time.
This is a long story.
I know.
The Nakusp line to Slocan was abandoned approximately 2 years ago. And it was abandoned before Celgar was ever talked about. There was the only traffic on the Nakusp line over the last 2 years of its operation were shipments of poles from Bell Pole and Nakusp. And they were, that was limited to 2 trains a year. So there wasn't any chip traffic from Nakusp south at all. In fact, you don't have any mills in Nakusp.
I'm
You have a
afraid
couple little ones.
I'm
but
going to
nothing
have
big.
to interrupt you. As much as I hate to do this, are the bluffs happening because Celgar is going in or not?
No.
We are leaving this in the
No.
midst here. However, I want to thank you again. Our MLA, the Honorable Howard Dirks, was with us tonight. And our media panel, Sean Leslie, Suzy Hamilton, David French, and Pat Fowler for being with us and asking very astute questions, and of course, our viewers for watching tonight and phoning in. Again, my name's Prashant Ziskind, host for the live phone-in show we had tonight on Shaw Cable. We hope you'll watch the rest of our shows on our TV listings tonight. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Is your house a mess? Do you need a babysitter? Are you tired of gardening, etc.? Then if so, call Hire a Student. 354-4272 between 5 and 9 p.m.
It's for a good cause. It's for the grade 7 French immersion trip to Vancouver.
Cost $2 per hour per student.